the most notable news coming out of the weekend, at least from a on-screen perspective, is the future of William Regal, where multiple outlets reporting that it looks like William Regal is done with AEW, and PW Insider being the first to report that it appears he will be back in WWE in a backstage position in the new year. So it looks like last Wednesday was the likely writing off of William Regal, unless they do some kind of a follow-up this week. But it looks like Regal is done, and he is going back to WWE. And with that knowledge, Way, how would you assess how this was handled in terms of removing him, but in the meantime, figuring him in very prominently into your main story with Jon Moxley and MJF?
First of all, I there's still a whole lot of mystery, and I think still a whole lot of questions surrounding, what exactly this contract was. It's sort of unprecedented to have somebody come in for less than a year and be able to make an exit like this. So
there's two options. It was either, Regal had stated it was a 3-year deal. If that was the case, then he's being let out early, or there was some provision, or it was a shorter term deal than he was stating publicly. Those are your options here. So
the provisions are probably the most interesting to me. Some of the reporting is indicating that there might be some sort of clause about Triple H getting into power, and somehow that triggering some sort of provision that would allow him to leave. That I would find quite remarkable if that's the case. And I wonder if we'll ever.
How could you even have that? How could you even have that foresight at the time he came into this company?
I don't know. We again don't know the specifics. It could be as simple as Triple H coming back into power for the Performance Center or something. We can only speculate because we don't exactly know. But just the idea that this is actually happening, it looks like, is quite wild to me, and just seems to cap off a year of a lot of unprecedented news. But it's yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, of all the moves that were made, eliminating Paul Levesque's mentor and somebody that was, as close to him as anyone, is that not the loudest message that came during all those waves of cuts that William Regal was one of those? Outside of Shawn, I would say there would be, and there was a vital reason they needed Shawn, but it's that was a very loud message. And I thought it at the time. And I think in hindsight, the first opportunity that Paul Levesque has, he's bringing him right back into the company.
We just didn't know what that first opportunity would have been. And, evidently it's less than a year into this AEW run. So getting back to your question about, how it was handled via creative, I wonder if when they knew about it, how far into this BCC run, how much when they set out to create the BCC, how much did they actually accomplish of what they set out to do before having to wrap up at least William Regal's involvement in it? I think using him as the reason why MJF turned. And then the reason why I guess MJF beat Moxley, I should say. You can't really kind of put him in a more prominent role, William Regal, than something like that. The finish of your world title match in the main event, and now furthering that and using Regal as sort of the reason why Bryan Danielson might want to get back in MJF. I think you're really maximizing the value that you have with William Regal on his way out, and I think you're doing it in a pretty respectful manner. It's not like they're burying him or anything like that, and I don't. See any reason
quite the opposite. I would say, yeah, he. Look at the talent that have come in over this last year, and William Regal was out there every week. He was on commentary every week. This was somebody that was heavily utilized on screen, and you could certainly argue, the different ways that you could have gone about it. You could have used Regal as sort of the sacrificial lamb in the lead up to MJF and Moxley, but at that point you were building up MJF as a babyface, or at least a pseudo babyface, and that did not work for where they were going. Coming out of it, your options were Moxley gaining his revenge, and instead of telling Regal to run for the hills last week, it could have been just this big showdown at the end of the show, and Moxley, you have some dramatic ending. Maybe he shanks him in a prison.
Yeah, they chose not to write him off that way. I kind of like the way Moxley left things with Regal though. You know, it was just the type of thing where he didn't need to physically get his hands on the guy in order to have closure. Like he told him off, told him to run away as far as he could, and you could see like the heartbreak within Moxley in that particular setting, and I thought that felt satisfyingly conclusive enough to me without some sort of physical attack.
Yeah, it's like I don't know how utilizing Regal just so prominently. It's like for Moxley, if Moxley's the ultimate like rematch for MJF, it's almost as though like Regal's now out of the picture. Moxley does not have the same, you know, he is not fighting on behalf of Regal like Danielson is. So it's, you know, you could certainly move the pieces around, but
MJF still fucked him over. You know, you can argue MJF was the reason the mentor turned on Moxley, so he could still have that grudge.
We still don't know why Regal turned on Moxley.
Yeah, that is something they did not.
That was a big hole last week, and I hope that this Wednesday that part is explained.
But how? Like, I mean,
I don't think you can see Regal again. I think it really limits the impact of last week's angle if we hear from Regal. Like, that should have been the last we ever see of Regal, is last week and him taken out on a stretcher, and he's never brought back. Yeah, but we'll see. That's a major hole, is why Regal did that, because I thought that was what we would get a week ago.
Right.
When they did the segment.
Did the email like indicate any reasoning? Like the email was really just about like him encouraging MJF to like be the best villain of all time. Didn't really say anything about like, you know, his like, could it be just that like he was cheering for MJF so much that kind of, you know, exceeded whatever.
Well, you're doing their job for them. Like, they haven't indicated any of that. Like, that needs to be fleshed out somewhat. And again, to explain it now is to what end? Like, there's no payoff there. Like, to come out and Regal has this whole list of reasons he turned on Moxley. Well, there's no follow up there for Moxley to gain his revenge on Regal.
I mean, MJF would be the revenge. You know, you'd be taking it out on him. But I mean, you might be better off not even kind of revisiting the whole Regal aspect of it anymore.
Yeah. I think it's now you're moving on to life after Regal, and hopefully the Danielson as the surrogate gains something from that he is fighting. But at the same time, like, your audience is not going to be as sympathetic for this cause that Danielson is fighting on behalf of, because you just saw Regal screw your top babyface. So it's like they really did get muddied along the way. And I do think that there is some course correction here, that the turn by Regal sort of like you could argue that MJF just taking out Regal minus the turn, you know, could you have still got to that destination and had a bit more sympathy for Regal, as opposed to the guy that kind of got what was coming for him, but got it from the top heel instead of the top babyface?
The whole, you know, MJF being a pseudo babyface in the lead up to Full Gear, I think it made for interesting television. It made for like some unpredictability when heading into Full Gear, and maybe that was sort of like a worthy exchange, you know, rather than a straightforward him attacking Regal type of story. But yeah, coming out of it, maybe they have a little bit of, you know, course correcting. I will say, I think all the segments that Regal has been involved in, especially the ones with MJF, have been so strong that I'm not like as sort of like caught up in, you know, the how tight the story is. Like, because the segments have been so great, the reactions have been so great, I'm almost just kind of like, I still see it as a pretty hot program, you know, with everything involving Mox and MJF and Bryan.